I had to put my my vest on because the heat is controlled by my kitchen thermostat. And so when the sun shines in the kitchen, it warms it up out there, but it doesn't do a lot for this room. So if I look like I'm shivering, occasionally I am. Okay, we'll come back to our session this afternoon, and we're going to be talking about section 148, which is on page 65 of HB2. So I see that Matthew has joined us again, and I believe that he wanted to say a few words about this, kind of a overview for us, and then we'll proceed from there. And I understand someone will be joining us from the Attorney General's office as well. And Mickey, is Colonel Quinn or Commissioner Quinn going to join us?
He is available and on the call if you would like him to participate too. He is here.
Yeah, just bring him up if you would. Okay, the person from the AG's office hasn't signed in yet?
No, he's here. He's here.
Oh, he is. Yeah, bring him up as well, please. Okay, Matt, if you would like to start out with an overview, and then we'll go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good to see everyone once again today. I'm actually going to have the committee start on page 64 because I think that'll help explain what you then see on page 65. So this conversation is a continuation of the Lee Act Commission that was brought together by the governor last year. And out of that report were 48 unanimous recommendations that some moved forward through executive order, others were advanced through rule. And this is one of those recommendations that would require legislation. So what you see here on page 64, and I'm looking at line 13, which establishes a study commission to review the best way for this independent statewide entity to take shape. So you see that there are in lines 20 to 23 what the makeup of that commission would look like. And then the remainder of this page articulates the duties that this study commission would have to bring forward a recommendation for additional legislation next year that if this commission does come to a favorable recommendation for this office and there's an agreed upon structure, you then see on page 65 the appropriation to this yet to be created entity in the second year of the biennium only. So what we've done, we've already allocated the funding to be available should this study commission come to a favorable recommendation and recommend implementation next year. That funding is already there, and we were trying to be proactive and think ahead to make sure that commission had broad flexibility to do their work and figure out the best path forward. That's kind of my overview of the sections. I'm happy to turn it over to the Department of Justice, and I see Matthew Broadhead is here as well. If the committee has questions on more of the details or more of the ongoing conversations relative to Lee Act.
Okay. Attorney Broadhead, would you like to say a few words?
Happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my name is Matt Broadhead. I am the Bureau Chief for the Transportation and Construction Bureau. And in that capacity, I'm the Chief Civil Counsel to the Department of Safety. The LEAC Commission was established in June of 2020. It pulled together stakeholders from law enforcement, from various community groups, and stakeholders representing civil liberties rights groups, and just various stakeholders. They came to really a remarkable consensus on this, and this was recommendation number 16, which is a centerpiece of their recommendations. It creates a independent oversight, or the recommendation creates an independent body, state agency that oversees complaints of law enforcement misconduct. And since the commission issued its recommendations back in August, we had a various group of lawyers that represented law enforcement, and also from the ACLU and the Public Defender's Office. We had been working on legislation. Many of the recommendations that we worked on are currently in SB 96. But this one, we were very close on draft legislation that had consensus, but they were still, by the time the filing deadline came, we still were at a kind of a point where we didn't quite have consensus. So a study committee or commission that's in HB2 would really bring our work product that is existing to the finish line. It's envisioned that tight deadline that's in HB2 for the commission, that between when we convene in, if all goes well, and within July or August, that we'd be able to get to the finish line by that November date that's in there. I have an 11-page draft. Most of the language has been agreed upon. The sticking points where we really need legislative input on, of course, is on how to treat the public records. What records are public, what records are not public. Are the hearings public? Are they not public? And so the idea is to pull these stakeholders back together with legislators and try to get this thing, like I said, across the finish line. So that's kind of an overview. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Representative Heath, could you hold off just a second? And Commissioner Quinn, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, other than I agree with everything Attorney Broadhead said, and I was on the commission, so we met for 26 different occasions. And as you look at the LEAC book, recommendation number 16, sections A through I, is pretty much the end work product of a very diverse group that made this recommendation. And I think it's very important. And I agree with Matt, he's done a lot of work here and he's trying to just thread the needle and get it done.
Representative Heath?
Oh, thank you. This is a subject I really know absolutely nothing about. I've read the LEAC recommendations, and I know it's been controversial just because I read about in the newspapers. How is the process when complaints come in? How are they currently handled?
There currently is no centralized oversight. That was part of the basis for the recommendation to create an independent office. Currently, on one side of the ledger, people were complaining that when you have a complaint about law enforcement misconduct, you file it with the agency that oversees the officer. And that creates an internal tension. And there's many of those records, discipline records, are not public records. So the public really just goes into a vacuum. That's one side of the aisle. On the other side, law enforcement agencies, they have a really unique role in society in that their authority is unlike any other area of employment. And so to create a standardized process by which these are overseen is really palatable, and from law enforcement, they really want that standardization. So that there was room there for law enforcement and various stakeholders to get to an agreement. You'll see that there are various states that after the incident with George Floyd, many states adopted or moved to adopt similar oversight agencies, Massachusetts, I think, being the latest that just went into effect.
Thank you. So if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is the lorry list, I'm presuming, that we're talking about? Or is that another debate about what to do with the lorry list?
It's connected, but this is not the lorry list. What this is designed to do is to replace the lorry list. There is another bill that we've worked on and do have consensus on that addresses the current lorry list, or the EES, the exculpatory evidence schedule, as it's known now. So we will be planning to offer a bill this session on the EES, for going forward, this is designed to replace the EES.
Thank you.
Representative Murray, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is the money going to be used for? Is this to staff the entity? What expenses are you expecting here for $500,000?
Yes, thank you, Representative Murray. And this is page 132 of the budget book. We put together a very high-level sketch of what an agency would require for staffing. We worked with the Department of Administrative Services to identify some of those job titles, the appropriate compensation for those. Ultimately, all of that is contingent on the study commission's recommendation and what that ultimately looks like. But we did want to make sure we had adequate funding for what one hypothetical agency might look like. And we feel that this is in the relative size and scope of what this entity would need. But again, all of it contingent on what the study commission would report back on.
So if I might follow up on that, this money would not be required until next year. Is that correct?
That's correct. And you'll notice there's no appropriation in FY22 in HB1.
Okay. Representative, so, oops, let me drop back a bit. So the 517,000 is for starting in 23?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Representative Petrie.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. How extensive is the lorry list in New Hampshire? Do we really have a big problem here?
I don't know how to answer that. There are, I think it's been publicly disclosed, there are 225 officers on the list currently, and give or take a few. It's currently the subject of several lawsuits, in the sense that some officers challenge their placement, and also there is a lawsuit that it seeks to make the list public, and that went up to the Supreme Court, and now it's still pending back down on remand in the Superior Court. So those are the facts related to it. I don't know. I can't comment or characterize on how extensive it is, or to the comparable to other states with a similar population, whether or not that's more or less than other states. I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you. Mr. Broadhead, I guess, or Mr. Mailloux, I guess my question is for either of you. The thing, I mean, I think that the idea of establishing something, as I understand it, what is envisioned is something similar to the Judicial Conduct Committee applying to police officers. But one of the things and I think generally that's a very good idea. The caveat I have is I wonder if how this is intended to apply to what I would refer to as very sort of minor infractions by a police officer that nonetheless, I suppose theoretically could be the subject of a Laurie list. And let me just give an example, a hypothetical example. Suppose that a police officer is accused of, taking too long a lunch break. So it's, the chief of police or the captain or whatever says, wait a minute, you're only supposed to have 20 minutes or half an hour for lunch. You were out, you were off. We couldn't get you on the radio for 45 minutes. So what's going on? And the officer offers some kind of an explanation, which now the supervisor has to decide, do I believe that or not? And suppose the supervisor says, I don't believe it. So now, at least arguably, the police officer has been found to have lied. So, does that get on the Laurie list, and does that go to this commission to be resolved? Because if that's true, I suspect that there are a lot of those kinds of things, maybe not the example I particularly made up, but those kind of really minor sort of personnel things that happen a lot, not only in law enforcement, but in every other industry.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Matt, I see you're unmuted. Do you want to go first?
The only thing that I would say is those types of decisions would be within the realm of what the study commission would look to sort out. And I guess, Matt, at that point, I turn it over to you to speak to the details of the current structure versus what might have already been agreed to previously.
Yeah, this so there are two things that I'll address, and it's a very good point, Representative Lynn. I'm used to calling you Justice Lynn, but so the first thing is that's what this agency is trying to address, is that what might be misconduct in one police jurisdiction is not misconduct in another police jurisdiction. And so those minor, some would call them white lies, right? That could land you on the list in one police department, but maybe not in another department. And so what this would create this agency would create a uniform standard to treat things like that. And I will say that the definition that we have currently agreed on for this type of claim is that conduct that would negatively reflect on the officer's trustworthiness or credibility, which is the constitutional standard. And then it lists specific instances, including a lie during a civil, administrative, or criminal proceeding, in a police report, or in an internal investigation. So there are kind of discrete, I think, tangible standards that this study commission would be analyzing, and I think they would run through those scenarios of what should be, misconduct under the statute that we're creating, and what should not be.
Representative Quinn, you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to add to what Matt said to Representative Lynn. If Section D in that recommendation in Lee Act, we asked to define statewide universal definition regarding what constitutes misconduct. And to your point, sir, a police department has an internal affairs department. Officer says, I backed into a delineator post, I'm sorry. It's investigated, it's solved. The officer gets, some, minor counseling. That doesn't go to this committee. Once we define integrity, because to your point, sir, there are a lot of mistakes that are made. There are a lot of things that get resolved, but it's the more serious or egregious conduct, or as Matt said, that goes to the integrity or what would be, exculpatory in trial. So there are a lot of things that take place that would never get forwarded. But that's why we had a lot of conversation on this in Lee Act. And we said, we have to define, to Matt's point, what is misconduct? So once we get that definition, then those types of cases, to your point, something minor, if the person didn't tell the truth, could be an integrity issue and could be forwarded up. So the definition is really, really important. But to your point, there's so much that takes place that are mistakes. People make mistakes. They will get counsel. They will, it will go in their file, but it might not rise to that level that Matt's gonna hopefully get defined.
Thank you.
Chair, you're muted.
I think you're muted, Representative Umberger.
Aaron, we can't hear you.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah,
Better.
there we go.
I obviously hit the wrong thing as I was doing this. So I apologize for my lack of Zoom experience. So Representative Murray, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a subjective element to this? Because I think, you're looking at infractions, something that, say, an officer says to me might just roll off my back, said to someone else might put them over the edge. So is there a subjective element, and how do you deal with that? Or am I just off in another field here?
You mean subjective in terms of the definition of misconduct?
Yeah, suppose as I said, you could say something to me and it'll just roll off my back. I figure, oh, ha, ha. You could say the same thing to someone else and they want to sue you for defamation or something.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a good point. And actually it's a key thing that we hear from our law enforcement constituents on our legislative working group. And we have worked really hard to, you can't eliminate all subjectivity, but to really focus the terms so that it reduces significantly the subjectivity. And that was one, I think back in December, we had some meetings, maybe even in January on it. But we worked really hard with the folks from the ACLU and with the Chief Hibecki from Hollis, Dan Conley, who's an attorney prosecutor and also a member of law enforcement from Goffstown, as well as representatives, the lawyers for two of the biggest police unions in the state. And we worked really hard to remove as much subjectivity as possible so that officers, when they're on the ground, they know what is or is not misconduct.
Representative Murray, if I could just add to what Matt said, and the reason I think this is so important, and Representative Lynn can understand this based on his prior career, is that if a head of an agency deems that he or she believes that the officer was not truthful, that could essentially end a career, could end employment. So to that, we thought that this offered what was neutral, independent, and an opportunity for the officer to, go in and say, no, this is, because at some point if you might not believe that someone's being truthful, but is it more probable than not? I mean, do you have, is the proof, knowing how high the stakes are, and then this offers an appeal to the Supreme Court. So knowing the stakes are so high, and I'll let Matt weigh in if he wants. We just want to make sure we get it right. And because a lot of times, there might not be that concrete, evidence or video or so, but again, the integrity is everything. And we thought that this would be, offer more due process for the men and women in law enforcement. Matt, did I make sense, Matt?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, it made sense to me. So if I can understand it, everything's going well.
Matt's
So,
my lawyer. Matt's my lawyer, so I always go to Matt.
yeah, yeah. Representative Heath, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then what this means is we're going from no systematized process to deal with these complaints to a process that is organized and has accountability, and the funds that are attached to it will help in the process of developing that infrastructure for which the commission would work. I guess that's my question. Am I getting this right? And if so, I think this is just a very positive move for our state to make, because it seemed so subjective previously. But there just didn't seem to be a process based on what I just heard. So, but will the funding be used to bring consultants to help design this?
So the only thing that I would clarify, Representative Heath, would be the timeline. So we stand here March 15th, as of March. This budget hopefully will become effective July 1st. I think that's everyone's hope. From there, this commission is established. They have until this November to complete their work, bring legislation for 2022's legislative session to formally outline what this entity would do. And then the funding piece only begins in fiscal year 2023, once this entity, assuming it does move forward, is stood up, and the dollars would fund the staff and their operational requirements. So no money tied to the study commission for consultants or anything of that nature, at least specifically to HB2. I don't know if there are provisions in other bills that might do something like that, but these dollars would be once this is stood up and operationalized.
Mr. Scipia, did you have something you wanted to add to this?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
Certainly, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, for the record, my name is John Scippa. I'm the Director of Police Standards and Training here in New Hampshire. And I just wanted to speak very quickly to Madam Heath's question a little bit earlier. I do think it's important to let everybody know that, you know, presently there is a system in place. During the LEAC Commission, it was determined that the system that's in place to address these kinds of events is not standardized throughout the state, but in fact, it is something that Police Standards and Training handles right now. We are the regulatory body for certification of police officers, and we do operate as an executive standalone branch of government, and we do have statutory authority to address these concerns. The problem that was highlighted during the LEAC Commission was that there was no really robust resources for us to do this in the first instance. And secondly, our rules lacked a lot of things that Commissioner Quinn just spoke about and Attorney Broadhead just spoke about, to include a universal definition of what would constitute misconduct and a statewide universal way to accept complaints. And then finally, the notion of building in transparency and the public availability for these types of hearings that we already hold. So I didn't want anybody on this committee to think that there is nothing in place right now in the first instance. And secondly, I look forward to working with whatever subcommittee is put together to address this. I was not at the table during this last round of discussions that Attorney Broadhead was leading, and I do think that that would be something that would need to happen, just so that we're making sure that we're covering all the bases here. Thank you.
Representative Lynn, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. And it's really more of sort of a two things that I hope this commission will think about, and or that it doesn't become a problem. And I guess the first one is the issue, and I say this because this has been something that has been sort of a things that lawyers and judges have grumbled about in their own disciplinary system, and that is that as you may know, Matt, under the both really under the judicial conduct system and under the bar regulatory thing, it can often be the case that the lawyer at the end, or the judge at the end of the whole process, is required to pay the costs of the prosecution of the lawyer or the judge. And that may be entirely appropriate for lawyers and judges. I think it would be really unfair to, police officers aren't making the kind of money that lawyers and judges are making. And I think it would be really unfair if law enforcement officers who went through this process at the end of it were required to pay the costs of that. And then the second thing, and this may be something that's obvious and maybe you've dealt with it already, but I assume that whatever is proposed in terms of how this commission will operate eventually, it will not in any way interfere with law enforcement supervision being able to take whatever disciplinary action they want to take. In other words, the only thing that this commission would deal with is what goes into this list. Whether an officer gets fired or suspended or nothing at all happens will be entirely up to whoever's in charge of the agency, I assume, and nothing that this law would do would change that.
Right, I could take that. So on the issue of costs, we're very mindful of law enforcement because of their unique role. And I defend state troopers when they're accused of misconduct in civil litigation. And so from one incident, we're mindful of a police officer may face a disciplinary hearing. They may face a police standards and training hearing. They may face a misconduct hearing under this proposed statute, and then a litigation, some civil litigation. So for defending four things simultaneously in some cases, maybe it does raise costs concerns. And so we've designed this process to be as minimal cost as possible. And we never considered having a cost payment provision in terms of having to force them as a result of this to have to pay. That's not in our proposed bill, and it never was. And I just forgot the second thing as I was answering that. What was the second question? That this
commission would deal only with the issue of whether something stays on an officer's record or not. It would in no way interfere with the supervision of a police officer, the chief or whatever, deciding that, the officer, whatever the discipline would be.
Correct. Yes. This is the only issue before this commission would be whether or not there was a sustained finding of misconduct. There is no disciplinary authority. There is no authority over the law enforcement certification. That's governed by a separate process. This is for transparency purposes, and it has members of the public that sit on the commission. So non-law enforcement members take part in the decision. So it is a different standard than police standards and training. It serves a different purpose, like I said, to replace the Lori list eventually, and to create accountability.
Thank you.
If I could, this commission is only going to be only going to be working until such time as you decide whatever you decide for legislation. Is that correct?
Matt, did you want to take that one? Or I'm happy to answer it, but
I'm sorry, as far as when this commission would complete its work. Yeah, so the commission would only exist through November 1st of this year. And the commission has a sole purpose to bring legislation to codify what the duties would be. The commission wouldn't exist in perpetuity once their recommendations brought forward, and then assuming the legislature were to enact those recommendations to create this entity, that entity would begin operation in the second year of the biennium and thereon.
I have to think about that a minute. So the legislation that you're proposing would have to say effective on passage. Because if it comes in November, well, November or December, depending on whether it goes to the House or the Senate, by the time it gets through both of the bodies that we're looking at, we're going to be in June of 22. And so it would be effective 30 June of 22. Am I interpreting that correctly?
I would say, Representative, it could not take effect prior to July 1st of 22 because the funding's only there in that year.
Okay.
This is all stuff that the commission would have to work out, and next year's legislature could either appropriate additional money if they wanted to start sooner, or they could, push it past July 1st, right? And that money would just lapse. But I think those are all questions that are best answered, not as part of this conversation with HB2, but rather next session after this commission's done its work.
Okay. Representative Porter, you have a question? I'm sorry that I stepped in there.
Okay, Madam Chair. Thank you for letting me ask my question. Again, I'm not familiar at all with the Lori list or how law enforcement officers are disciplined or whatever, but if there's an officer who has serious misconduct and ends up on the Lori list, do other jurisdictions looking to hire, do they know currently that this person is on the Lori list, or is that confidential at this point? And if once this new entity is established, will then a jurisdiction have access to the list of people who have serious misconduct charged against them?
sure. Under a police standards and training rule, there's a background check that's conducted for every new hire, and part of that is review of discipline. So they'd be aware of it if it was sustained discipline. That's the only thing that lands somebody on the Lori list. So they wouldn't even need to go to the Lori list to get that information. Although if they've had dealings in the past through cases or whatnot, certainly they could have access to it. Law enforcement and prosecutors have access for the purposes of their constitutional duties.
Okay. Does anyone have any opposition to adding police standards and training to this commission that you're forming?
Representative, the one thing that I would just check on is I know currently, I just want to make sure that the structure of the commission is balanced appropriately. So right now the membership is the Attorney General or designate, one member of the House, one senator, and 4 members of the LEAC commission that was established by executive order. So to the point that we start identifying additional members or members that might be a subset of that LEACT commission, we just want to make sure that we maybe either offset that or delineate others. But I don't know if Matt or either of the agencies that are on have any thoughts on that topic.
I don't have any thoughts other than, John, weren't you a member of the commission?
Yes, I was.
So certainly in that capacity, he'd be eligible to be appointed, to that commission as written.
Okay, so the 4 additional members, the police standards and training was there. And who is going to actually appoint this commission?
As written, those 4 members, I believe, would be appointed by the commission, but I would have to check on that and report back to you, Madam Chairwoman. A through C are all clearly delineated, but we would want to confirm the intent of D and if that needs to be further clarified.
Well, I only say this, that this is saying it doesn't identify, it identifies the Attorney General's office as the chairperson. And then it goes on to talk about the other people. So it would be basically up to the chairperson to decide who these 4 members from the LEAC commission are. Is that wrong or right, or?
If I could just confirm and report back, Madam Chairwoman, I would appreciate just an opportunity to make sure I don't speak out of turn. It doesn't specifically say in HB2. That might be something we want to further clarify through an amendment, just to ensure that who has the power to appoint those individuals is specifically stated in the law.
Okay, nobody's jumping out there saying I'm in charge, so that's a good thing. Okay, that would, I think that is necessary, since the commission is just being formed and these 4 other members, wherever they're going to come from, I don't know. I'm going to turn to the money. Okay. I went and got my HB1, which, anyhow, it shows 5 people for this future, whatever it is. And I'm trying to come to grips with what kinds of people would you be looking for to run this, whatever you're going to call it.
So, Representative, what I would say is ultimately all of this is contingent on what the study commission has for recommendations. As for the structure that we built the budget around, and again, all of this is subject to change, this would have an unclassified director and associate director. And then there would be 3 classified positions that you see in HB1, an attorney 2, a paralegal 2, and a clerk 3. So it really is just the bare bones of what an entity like this would be required to have to conduct these types of proceedings. We chose very detailed analysis. The alternative could have been just to appropriate, say, $500,000 without thinking through what the actual structure would be. So we went through a more thorough exercise, but all of this is with the caveat that whatever structure this commission would recommend and the legislature would then have to pass and adopt, that would be what that ultimately would happen. But we wanted to make sure we had a rough outline of how much money would be required for an entity like this to exist.
If I could just follow up a little bit, then I'll be right with you, Mary.
Just the page, that's all I need.
Oh, sorry, page 132
Thank
in
you.
HB1.
Thank you.
Do we have other things like this in state government that have permanent people assigned to them, assigned to it?
So Madam Chairman, on that point, I would say that there are several agencies that would have some relation to what this new entity would be tasked with. I think you have most of them here on the call this afternoon as well. But the recommendation from LEACT was an independent statewide entity, which is why we're moving in this direction. And I guess that's all that I would have to say on that topic, but I think this might be another area for the study commission to review exactly what existing functions potentially overlap with this. But again, ultimately, we want to put that for the study commission to report back on. And from there, I'd turn it over to Matt Broadhead for more on that.
Yeah, I think the closest model that we have that's currently in state government to the current version of what we have put together would be the Human Rights Commission, which has a pretty small permanent staff, but there's commission members that oversee it, and that's kind of the setup that we are going with in the New Hampshire tradition.
Representative Heath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know who would answer this, probably the Attorney General Matthew. What is the final authority of this commission, or is that to be determined by them?
The authority of the commission or of the underlying agency that the commission would study?
Well, as they make their determinations about the process, after the process is determined, will they continue to have any authority over its implementation?
So as it's currently written, and this is section 146 of HB2 at the bottom of page 64, the study commission is repealed on November 2nd of 2021. So as currently written and contemplated, they would not continue to exist. Because again, their duty is to bring forward legislation for the legislature to consider. If there's another model, I think we're open to it, but we tried to hew very closely to what the LEACT commission what LEACT put forward as their recommendation. And given that we weren't able to quite solidify all those details in time for the filing deadline, we've continued on with the study commission. But again, in a very short window, just to finalize those details.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Representative Heath, I would say that this commission might in fact recommend an oversight commission, but that's up to whatever the commission decides. It's kind of a open-ended, because there are people that oversee if you're using the Human Rights Commission, there are people that do oversee that as well. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens. Representative Porter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a little thought here. What if this group comes up with recommending future legislation, and either the legislation does not get filed or does not get passed? Where are we then? Just a little thought.
Well, we're right where we are now.
Exactly.
with Mr. Scippa taking care of all of it. So
Yeah.
I think that there are folks on here, or maybe let me just throw this out too. It could be that instead of creating a whole new commission, they just give a different sort of authority to what the folks in police standards and training do. I mean, they don't have to have a new commission. You know, it could be that that's where this whole thing lands, but I guess that what I'm saying is that that's a discussion and decision that we don't need to make. That's what we have the commission there for. Representative Turcott, did you have, I thought I'd seen your hand up earlier. Did I miss it?
You did, but somewhere along the line, somebody answered it, so I'm all set.
Okay. I'm having some problems with the money in 2023. Not because I don't think that if whatever is devised will need people, okay? But we have already in the HB1 set the scope of what this new thing can do by saying in here that you can have 5 people. And so that bothers me to the extent that I'm just not sure that that's the right way to build this railroad. Myself, I would rather see us do something like, put $1 in it, and then whatever the commission comes up with would be something that says, based on the fact that the law passes, then the governor has the authority to withdraw the money at that point in time. That's my thought process on it.
And Madam Chairwoman, that certainly could be one approach, but what we ultimately decided to do was to err on the side of caution to ensure that the budget that we passed is balanced and has funding set aside for this entity. Now, if the commission either comes to no recommendation or they recommend legislation that isn't ultimately enacted, the money would lapse back to the general fund at the end of the biennium. But we wanted to make sure that this didn't get lost in the budget process. And then if there's not money sitting around next year to fund it, we didn't want to hamstring their efforts because the governor, of course, is committed to the LEAC recommendations and is committed to bring them forward. And again, we just wanted to make sure there was a pot of money for them. I would defer to the LBA if there's a different model to just do a line item appropriation that a new entity could assign to different class lines or whatnot. Again, we did a very detailed sketch, but didn't want to constrain what this commission would do.
I hear you. That's the difference between looking at what I have in the budget versus what the governor had in his budget. But, I understand where you're coming from. And I also realize that it will take some time to stand up this group. It's not like it's going to occur on 1 July. However it is set up. So we'll think about that, and we'll work on that as a committee. But that's just my initial thought process. Okay, are there any other comments, questions, thoughts, anything anybody wants to say? Oh, Representative Heath.
Mine's just an apology to Mr. Scippa in case I made it sound like I didn't think that things were going the way they should be going. I want to apologize. It's totally my ignorance of how the whole system works. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I'm sorry.
Madam, there is absolutely no apology needed, and candidly, unless you're a police officer or you're involved with law enforcement in the state of New Hampshire, nobody even knows we're here. So no worries at all.
I'm sorry, we know you were there, okay? And some of us knew that you worked on those issues, but some of us didn't, and that's okay. You've been doing as good a job as you could with your hands tied. So we all, no, you have not, you're relatively new, but since you've been on, you have been doing a great job. So if there are no other comments, questions, thoughts? Okay, we will, this is just another one on our list of things to resolve between now and about next Tuesday or Wednesday. So we had something pretty difficult this morning. I think this one is a little easier if we can figure out the funding side of it. I don't think any of us are opposed to the formation of the commission and for them to bring us legislation next year when at that point finance will be out of it, which is not a bad thing. Oh, sorry. And I don't think there's anyone on this this group that wants to be part of this study commission. So if there is, I'm sure you can contact Mr. Broadhead and he would be happy to find a place for you. So if there's nothing else, Mickey, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think at the very least, you know, there was some commingling of this commission and the body cam, dash cam fund in House Bill 2. So it's a little confusing as you read through these sections. So at the very least, we're going to probably do an amendment to clean up what's here and then also incorporate whatever the division's recommendations are. But I just wanted to make it clear that if you're confused when you look through these sections, I think there was some issues with the drafting. So, but we'll work through it.
Well, Mickey, I think we had a lot of confusion on a lot of things. So, but that's why we're here. That's why you're here, is to make sure that you keep us straight. But I agree totally that this commission stuck in there where it was probably was not the best place for it. Okay, I guess I will see. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Heath.
Madam Chair, could we just walk through this week? I know we have a lot to cover. I know that tomorrow we've got 2 bills and then we have a hearing all forever. Then on Wednesday, we're going to have a work session. Now, will that go late into I'm trying to figure out my calendar for the week of how extensive we're going to be tied up in the afternoons and mornings.
Well, that's a good question. How about it depends? Mickey is putting together for everybody a list of what we know as open items. Okay, and I will go through that list and hopefully tomorrow, no, probably not tomorrow, but Wednesday, that we will start down that list of things to do. And I will try to initially pick out the things that I think we are all in agreement on, and then kind of leave the stickier things for later on. Like, I know, for example, we don't all agree on the combining of the university and the community college. So that will be, you know, a longer discussion, but that's kind of what my approach is. And that's why I mentioned that, you know, if you have amendments that you want to bring into HB2, that you do that, so that we know, you know, ahead of time, if that's the right term, where these discussions are going to go. Okay, so Representative Murray, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Do we know what our allotment is yet? And is Ways and Means reconsidering any of their estimates?
The answer to your first question is no. The answer to your second question is yes. When we will get that, I have no idea, okay? But I'm not expecting tens of millions of dollars, I'll put it that way. That
Just so it goes in the right direction from our perspective.
I got that. I got that. But I'm not on Ways and Means, okay? So I have done my darndest to get them to up that, because it's, you know, it's really the general fund is where the majority of the problem is. And as we know, our share of general funds is pretty small in relationship to Division 1 and Division 3. So we'll just have to see how that all plays out. But I don't expect that we'll be hearing anything from Ways and Means until maybe the first part of next week. And I'm sure at that time that more than likely any extra general funds would go to 1 and 2 or 1 and 3. Okay, that's just my supposition. Okay,
Yeah, thanks.
Representative Porter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Seeing as how this sitting with all of you has been enjoyable and informative, it's also kind of messed up my schedule. I just need to know, are we meeting on Friday?
No, we are not meeting on Friday. Friday, I'm meeting with the fiscal committee.
Okay, so
Okay.
we are meeting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, and then Monday again next week, and Tuesday.
That's the plan. And
Okay.
Wednesday and Thursday. It depends on how fast we get our work done.
Okay.
If we get it done, if we're all in agreement on all these issues, we should be finished by Thursday. But I know that that's a pipe dream on my part.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anything else? Oh, by the way, as long as I still have safety here, I never got anything back from any of the committees on the radio. What was that called? Radio, make sure everybody's the same. Part of it.
The
In
HB2 language.
Yeah,
When you say anything from anybody, who is the anyone, ma'am?
who did we send that to, Mickey? Was
Was
it
it to science and technology, perhaps? I can't remember. I know you sent it to one of the policy committees for review.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one I sent it to, but I think I sent it to transportation. Maybe they were the wrong ones, but they didn't get back to me either. So I guess that there's nothing in there that is controversial that I could see, is there?
Well, I won't say, what I will say is I asked Director Doyle, Mark Doyle, to kind of speak to the other stakeholders, the other commissioners, and have some conversations of what what is the vision here with this, and it's basically for planning, making sure we're making interoperable decisions on purchases, and somewhere like an overarching governance like DOIT has for certain expenditures. So we have heard nothing back. That's, and I asked Director Doyle personally, have you spoken outside there to the other agencies? And he's very, he over communicates. So I haven't heard anything, ma'am, negative.
Okay, well, that's easy then. We'll just leave it unless somebody comes and gets all upset, but I certainly haven't heard anything. Have you?
Steve, anything to add to that, Steve?
No, just everything that you said is absolutely true. We haven't heard any real negative feedback or pushback on the ideas.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. All right, so we will see you all tomorrow morning. Keep smiling.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.